By 1985, the average American washing machine could handle a full load in 30 minutes. And yet somehow, every laundry room in this country was crammed with objects that nobody could explain. A wire frame shaped like a pair of human legs hanging from the ceiling. A rubber ball you dropped into the rinse cycle on Faith. A wooden egg your mother kept in a basket next to the bleach and never once explained. Number 22 on this list looked like a headless mannequin wearing your father's slacks. And number 8 required you to store wet clothes in the refrigerator right next to the leftover meatloaf. So hit subscribe because here are 30 strange laundry room items from the 1980s that made absolutely no sense. Number 30. The sprinkle bottle. Before spray bottles became cheap enough to give away at grocery stores, your mother had a system. She took an empty glass Coca-Cola bottle, jammed a metal sprinkler cap into the neck, filled it with water, and used it to dampen clothes before ironing. The cap had tiny holes punched into it, like a miniature shower head, and you could buy one at the 5 and dime for a few cents. The whole concept sounds absurd today. You had a perfectly good sink. You had running water. But the sprinkle bottle gave you control. A few flicks of the wrist and the shirt was just damp enough to press flat without scorching. Every laundry room had one, usually sitting right next to the iron, and nobody thought twice about keeping a repurposed soda bottle as a permanent household tool. Number 29. Bluing liquid. Your grandmother kept a tiny bottle of blue liquid next to the detergent, and if you ever asked what it was for, the answer made no sense. You added blue to your whites to make them look whiter. That was the logic. Mrs. Stewart's bluing had been around for over a century, and by the 1980s, it was still sitting on laundry room shelves across the country. You would add a few drops to the rinse water, and somehow the blue tint counteracted the yellowing that white fabric picked up over time. It was an optical trick, not a cleaning agent. The fabric was not actually cleaner. It just looked brighter because your eyes were being fooled by the contrast, and yet your grandmother swore by it like it was a family secret passed down through generations. Number 28. The Suds Saver. Some washing machines in the 1970s and 1980s came with a feature that sounds like a joke but was printed right there in the owner's manual. After the wash cycle finished, instead of draining the soapy water down the drain, the machine pumped it into a nearby utility tub. The idea was that the detergent still had cleaning power left in it, so you could reuse that water for the next load. Your mother would wash the whites first in fresh water, save that batch of gray, lukewarm suds, then run the darks through whatever was left. The water sitting in that tub had bits of lint floating in it, a film of dissolved dirt on the surface, and a smell that got worse by the hour. And she put clothes into it. The whole system required a dedicated laundry tub next to the machine, connected by a hose, and the timing had to be right because if you let the saved water sit too long, it turned sour. By the late 1980s, detergent had gotten cheap enough that saving dirty wash water made no financial sense at all, and the feature quietly disappeared from new models. Nobody mourned it. Number 27. The laundry ball. It was a rubber or plastic ball about the size of a softball, filled with ceramic beads, tiny magnets, or some kind of mineral pellets that nobody could identify. The claim on the box was simple. Throw the ball into your washing machine instead of detergent, and it would clean your clothes through some combination of ionization, molecular restructuring, and whatever other science words fit on the packaging. No soap, no chemicals, just a ball bouncing around in the drum. Your mother bought one at a home show or from a mail order catalog, tossed it in with the towels, and declared the laundry clean. The clothes came out wet, which apparently was proof enough. Some versions cost $30 or $40, which was more than a year's worth of Tide. The companies behind them cited laboratory tests that nobody could find and used phrases like activated ceramics as though that explained anything. Most of them ended up in a junk drawer within 6 months, right next to the magnetic bracelet that was supposed to fix your back pain. Number 26. Powdered starch. Before spray starch came in an aerosol can, it came in a box. Niagara and Argo both sold powdered starch that you had to mix with water on the stove. stirring it over low heat until it turned into a thin paste. Then you dipped your clothes into it, wrung them out by hand, and ironed them stiff. The whole process could take an hour for a single batch of dress shirts. Your father expected his collars to stand up on their own, and this was how your mother made that happen. The powder left a faint residue on everything, and if you used too much, the shirt cracked when you moved. By the late 1980s, spray cans had replaced the box entirely, and nobody missed the stovetop routine. Number 25. Sock forms. These were flat metal or wooden cutouts shaped exactly like a human foot, and their only job was to keep socks from shrinking after the wash. You pulled a wet sock over the form, stretched it to the right size, and let it air dry. Every pair had to be done individually, one sock at a time, which meant a full basket of wet socks could take half the afternoon. The forms came in different sizes for different family members, and some households had a dozen of them lined up on a table in the laundry room like a display at a shoe store. The idea that you could just buy new socks when they shrank was not part of the conversation. You stretched them back into shape, and you moved on. Number 24. The indoor retractable clothesline. Bolted to opposite walls of the basement, this was a thin plastic or metal cord that pulled out from a spring-loaded housing, stretched across the room and hooked into a bracket on the far side. When you were done, you unhooked it, and the whole thing snapped back like a tape measure. The problem was that it always sagged under the weight of wet clothes, so everything hung in a low arc across the middle of the basement, and you had to duck under it to get anywhere. Some families had 2 or 3 lines running parallel, turning the entire basement into an obstacle course of damp sheets and dripping socks. And yet the dryer was right there, 10 feet away, running perfectly fine. Number 23. The laundry plunger. This was a wooden stick with a rubber or metal cone on the end, shaped almost exactly like a toilet plunger, and it sat in the corner of the laundry room waiting for its moment. You filled a tub or a bucket with hot water and detergent, dropped in a load of clothes, and plunged them up and down like you were unclogging a drain. The motion forced water through the fabric, which was supposedly a gentler clean than the machine could manage. Some families used it for delicates. Others used it because they flat out did not trust the washing machine with certain items. The plunger came in a few versions. Some had a flat suction cup on the bottom. Others had a cone with holes that created pressure as you pushed down. Either way, you stood over a tub of soapy water, pumping a stick up and down for 10 or 15 minutes in a house that had a perfectly functional washing machine 6 feet away. And nobody in the family thought that was unusual. Number 22. The pants stretcher. This was a wire frame shaped like a pair of human legs from the waist down to the ankles, with adjustable clips at the waist and spring-loaded tension bars running down each leg. After washing a pair of trousers, you slid the wet pants onto the frame, adjusted the tension until the legs were pulled tight, and hung the whole contraption from the ceiling or a hook on the wall. The pants dried flat, crease-free, and ready to wear without ironing. The stretcher itself looked disturbing. Standing in the corner of the laundry room, it looked like a headless, armless mannequin wearing your father's slacks. At night, in a dim basement, it could stop you in your tracks. More than one child in the 1980s had a genuine scare walking downstairs to grab something from the freezer and coming face to face with a wire skeleton wearing khakis. The mechanics were simple, but the commitment was not. You had to catch the pants at exactly the right moment, wet enough to stretch, but not so soaked that they dripped all over the floor. Too dry and the wrinkles were already set. Too wet and the weight pulled the fabric out of shape. Your mother knew the window, and she hit it every time. The device actually worked remarkably well. The tension kept the fabric smooth and the crease exactly where it was supposed to be without the risk of scorching from an iron. Some families had 2 or 3 of them hanging in a row, which made the laundry room look like a department store after hours. By the time permanent press fabrics became standard in the 1990s, the pants stretcher quietly disappeared. Nobody mourned it. Number 21. The washboard. By the 1980s, almost every home in America had a functioning washing machine. And yet somewhere in the laundry room, usually leaning against the wall behind the dryer or hanging from a nail, was a washboard. A ridged piece of glass or metal set into a wooden frame designed for scrubbing clothes by hand in a tub of water. Nobody used it as their primary washing method anymore, but it was still there because certain stains demanded it. Your mother would fill the laundry sink, lay the stained garment across the ridges, and scrub it with a bar of soap until the mark was gone. The washboard had been obsolete for decades, and yet throwing it away felt like giving up on something. So it stayed, gathering dust, ready for the emergency that came about twice a year. Number 20. The carpet beater. It was made of woven rattan or twisted wire, shaped like a large tennis racket with a long handle, and it had nothing to do with carpets by the time it ended up in the laundry room. Your mother used it to beat the dust out of heavy blankets, quilts, and comforters that were too bulky for the washing machine. You would hang the blanket over the outdoor clothesline and swing the beater against it as hard as you could, sending clouds of dust and lint into the air. The job usually fell to whoever lost the argument, and it was exhausting. 10 minutes of swinging and your arms burned. The blanket looked exactly the same afterward, but your mother insisted it was cleaner. The beater went back into the laundry room, and nobody touched it again until spring cleaning. Number 19. The trouser press. This was an electric appliance the size of a small door, and it did exactly one thing. You opened the two heated panels, laid a single pair of trousers between them, clamped it shut, plugged it in, and left it overnight. By morning, the trousers had a crease so sharp you could see it from across the room. The press stood upright in the corner of the bedroom or the laundry room, humming quietly through the night, pressing one pair of pants for 8 hours straight. One pair, one appliance, one entire night of electricity. Some models had a built-in timer and a trouser hanger on top, and families treated it like a piece of furniture. The Corby brand was the most common, and it showed up in department store gift registries right next to the toaster oven. You already had an iron. You already had an ironing board. But somebody decided that trousers deserved their own dedicated overnight heating device, and enough people agreed that it became a standard wedding gift for a solid decade before everyone quietly stopped using it. Number 18. The mangle iron. Now let us talk about ironing, because the 1980s had very strong opinions about wrinkles. This was not a handheld iron. This was a machine. A mangle was a large heated roller mounted on a frame with a padded pressing surface underneath, and you fed flat items like sheets and tablecloths through the gap between the roller and the pad. It pressed and dried the fabric in one pass, and it could handle a full set of bed linens in a few minutes. The machine itself was enormous, sometimes 4 feet wide, and it sat in the laundry room like a piece of industrial equipment that had wandered in from a commercial laundry. Operating it required both hands and a certain amount of nerve, because the roller was hot enough to cause a serious burn if your fingers got too close. Most families used it only for flat work. Number 17. The RIT dye pot. Every so often, your mother would pull a box of RIT fabric dye off the laundry shelf, fill the biggest pot in the kitchen with water, bring it to a rolling boil on the stove, and drop in a perfectly good pair of curtains that she had decided were the wrong color. The kitchen filled with steam. The water turned a shade of blue or green or burgundy that stained the inside of the pot permanently. She stirred the fabric with a wooden spoon, the same kind she used for soup, for 20 or 30 minutes while the dye splattered on the stovetop, the counter, and occasionally the ceiling. When it was done, she pulled the dripping fabric out with tongs, rinsed it in the sink until the water ran mostly clear, and hung it outside to dry. The item was now a slightly different shade than what the box promised, and the pot was never the same. But the bedspread was navy instead of teal, and apparently that justified turning the kitchen into a dye factory. Some families kept a dedicated dye pot in the laundry room, stained beyond recognition, pulled out a few times a year whenever something needed to be a different color than it already was. Number 16. 20 Mule Team Borax. The box had a picture of 20 mules pulling a wagon through the desert, and the powder inside was supposed to do everything. Boost your detergent, deodorize your garbage disposal, kill ants, clean tile grout, remove crayon from walls. Somewhere along the way, borax became the unofficial miracle product of the American laundry room, and by the 1980s, the box was still sitting on the shelf, even though most people could not tell you the last time they actually used it. It was there because it had always been there. Your mother bought it because her mother bought it, and her mother bought it because the mule picture looked trustworthy. The powder worked fine as a laundry booster, but most of its reputation came from tradition, not chemistry. Nobody tested it against modern detergent. The mules were enough. Number 15. The pantyhose lint catcher. Somewhere around the mid-1970s, somebody figured out that if you stretched the foot of an old pair of pantyhose over the end of the washing machine's discharge hose, it would catch all the lint before the water drained into the utility sink. This worked. It also looked completely absurd. A beige nylon stocking, usually sagging with a gray lump of wet lint, rubber banded to the end of a ribbed hose sticking out of the back of a Maytag. Every laundry room in the neighborhood had one. The stocking filled up every 2 or 3 loads, and you had to peel it off, shake the lint clump into the trash, and stretch it back on. Sometimes the rubber band snapped mid-cycle and the stocking shot off the hose, sending a wad of wet lint across the floor. The machine manufacturers eventually added built-in lint filters to the drum, but for about 15 years, the standard lint management system in American homes was a used piece of women's hosiery held in place with an office supply. Number 14. The hand wringer. Before spin cycles did the work, and even long after they did, some families still kept a hand wringer bolted to the side of the laundry sink. It was a pair of rubber rollers mounted in a cast iron frame with a hand crank on one side. You fed the wet garment between the rollers, turned the crank, and the pressure squeezed the water out of the fabric and back into the sink. The wringer could remove more water than wringing by hand, and it did it without twisting the fabric into a rope, which meant fewer wrinkles. The danger was real and well known. The rollers did not stop when your fingers got close. If you fed a shirt through carelessly and your hand followed, the rollers would grab your fingers and keep pulling. Every neighborhood had a story about someone who got caught, and the injuries were serious enough that safety releases became standard on later models. You pushed a bar at the top and the rollers separated instantly. But on the older units, the only way to stop was to crank backward and hope. The wringer was not gentle with clothes either. Buttons cracked, zippers bent. Anything with a snap or a buckle had to be positioned carefully so the hardware went through at the right angle. Your mother knew the pressure for every weight of fabric. Thin cotton went through fast. Denim required slow, even cranking with both hands. By the mid-1980s, most wringers had been replaced by machines with proper spin cycles, but the bolt holes that held them to the sink were still visible in basement laundry rooms for years afterward. 4 holes in the porcelain, and nobody ever filled them in. Number 13. The laundry marking kit. This was a small box containing a bottle of permanent ink, a set of rubber stamps with letters and numbers, and an ink pad. Its purpose was to stamp your family's name or initials into the tags of clothing so items could be identified if they got mixed up at camp, boarding school, or the dry cleaner. The kit sat in a drawer in the laundry room, and it came out every August before the school year started. Your mother would line up every new shirt, every pair of socks, and stamp your last name into the tag in tiny black letters. The ink was permanent. It did not wash out, did not fade, and could not be removed without cutting the tag off entirely. Decades later, you would find a shirt at a thrift store with someone else's name still stamped inside the collar. Number 12. The Downy Ball. This was a small blue plastic ball about the size of a tennis ball with a lid that unscrewed at the top. You filled it with liquid fabric softener, closed the lid, and tossed it into the washing machine at the start of the cycle. The ball was weighted so it stayed sealed during the wash, and when the spin cycle kicked in, the centrifugal force popped the lid open and released the softener at the right moment. The ball rattled around inside the drum like a trapped animal banging against the sides of the machine during every load. You could hear it from the kitchen, and it did not always work. Sometimes the lid failed to open, and you would pull your clothes out and find the ball still sealed at the bottom, full of softener that never reached the water. Number 11. Static guard spray. Before dryer sheets became the standard fix, static cling was treated like a genuine wardrobe emergency. You would pull a polyester blouse out of the dryer and it would cling to your arm like it was alive. Static guard came in a spray can and you hit the garment with a quick burst right before putting it on. The spray left a faint chemical smell that faded after a few minutes, and it worked well enough that the can lived permanently in the laundry room next to the iron. The real strangeness was the problem it was solving. Static cling was a side effect of synthetic fabrics tumbling in a hot dryer, and the solution was to spray more chemicals onto the chemicals that caused the problem in the first place. Nobody questioned the logic. The blouse stopped sticking, and that was good enough. Number 10. The fabric softener bar. This was a solid block of concentrated fabric softener, about the size of a bar of soap, that you hung inside your closet or linen cabinet on a small plastic hook. The idea was that the bar slowly released its scent over time, keeping your stored clothes smelling fresh between washes. The bar dried out after a few weeks and became a hard, crumbly block that no longer smelled like anything, and you replaced it with a new one. The concept was strange because it assumed your clean clothes would lose their freshness just from sitting in a closet. It assumed the closet itself was working against you. And yet people bought these bars by the millions, convinced that their wardrobes needed a tiny scented brick standing guard against staleness. Number 9. The darning egg. This was a smooth, egg-shaped piece of wood, sometimes attached to a short handle, and its only job was to help you repair holes in socks. You pushed the egg into the sock until it sat right behind the hole, stretching the fabric tight over the curved surface, and then you sewed the hole shut using a darning needle and matching thread. The egg gave you a firm, rounded surface to work against, so your stitches stayed even and the patch laid flat against your foot. The darning egg was strange for reasons that went beyond its shape. By the 1980s, a new pair of socks cost less than $1 at any department store. The time your mother spent repairing a single sock, sometimes 30 minutes for a heel that had worn through, was worth more than buying the replacement. And yet she did it anyway, because throwing away a sock with a hole in it felt wasteful, in a way that made no economic sense but perfect emotional sense. The eggs came in different materials. Some were polished hardwood, some were ceramic. A few were made of stone, heavy and cool in your hand, and those lasted decades. Your grandmother probably used the same one her entire adult life. The thread had to match the sock, which meant the darning basket always had a small collection of spools in gray, black, white, and navy. The skill itself has almost completely vanished. Most people under 40 have never seen a darning egg, let alone used one. Most people over 60 could still pick one up and sew a heel patch with their eyes closed. Number 8. The clothes dampening bag. Before steam irons made the job simpler, you had to dampen clothes by hand before pressing. The method was straightforward and completely bizarre. You sprinkled dry, wrinkled garments with water from the sprinkle bottle, rolled each item into a tight bundle, and packed them all into a plastic bag. Then you sealed the bag and put it in the refrigerator. The cold kept the moisture from evaporating, and the sealed bag let the dampness distribute evenly through each garment over several hours. When you were ready to iron, you pulled a bundle out, unrolled it, and pressed it while the fabric was perfectly, uniformly damp. The fact that your family kept a bag of wet shirts on the same shelf as the leftover pot roast was not something anyone discussed or questioned. Number 7. The moth crystal canister. It was a metal or glass canister, usually sitting on the top shelf of the laundry room, filled with small white crystals that smelled like the inside of a chemical plant. Naphthalene was the active ingredient, though nobody called it that. Everyone just said mothballs, even when they were crystals. The idea was that moths would eat holes through your wool sweaters and blankets while they sat in storage, and these crystals released a gas that killed the moths before they could start chewing. So your mother would pack freshly laundered wool items into a cedar chest or a sealed garment bag, toss in a generous handful of crystals, close it up, and leave it until fall. When you pulled the sweater out 6 months later, it smelled so strongly of chemicals that you had to wash it all over again before you could wear it. You washed it to store it, then washed it again to wear it. The smell seeped into everything: closets, drawers, entire rooms. Guests could smell it on you before you said hello. And the chemicals themselves turned out to be toxic enough that several formulations were eventually pulled from store shelves. But for decades, poisoning your entire wardrobe to protect it from insects seemed like perfectly reasonable housekeeping. Number 6. Ammonia in the rinse cycle. Your mother kept a jug of clear household ammonia on the shelf above the washing machine, and every few loads she unscrewed the cap and poured a splash directly into the rinse cycle. The claim was that ammonia cut through soap residue, softened the fabric, and made towels come out fluffier. It also made the entire laundry room smell like a hospital hallway. She measured it by eye, never with a measuring cup, and poured it straight into the drum while the machine was running. This was the same ammonia that the warning label said to keep away from skin and eyes. The same ammonia you were told never, under any circumstances, to mix with bleach because it would create a toxic gas. And she was pouring it directly onto the clothes her family wore against their bodies every day. The towels did come out softer. Nobody could argue with the results. But the routine of standing over an open washing machine, pouring an eye-watering chemical into a tub of spinning clothes, never struck anyone as unusual until liquid fabric softener made the whole practice unnecessary. Number 5. Laundry tongs. These were long wooden or metal tongs, sometimes 18 inches long, that your mother used to pull boiling hot items out of a pot on the stove. Before washing machines handled delicates and whites reliably, some families still boiled certain things to sanitize them: cloth diapers, dish towels, undergarments. The water was far too hot to reach into, so the tongs grabbed the fabric and lifted it out, steaming, into a waiting tub of cold rinse water. The tongs looked like they belonged in the kitchen, but they lived in the laundry room. By the mid-1980s, boiling laundry was mostly a thing of the past, but the tongs stayed in the drawer for years. Throwing them away meant acknowledging that your family once boiled their underwear on the kitchen stove, and nobody was ready for that conversation. Number 4. The external dryer lint trap. Not the lint screen inside the dryer, the other one. Some families in the 1980s had a secondary lint trap attached to the dryer's exhaust vent, usually a small metal box with a wire screen inside that caught lint before it blew outside through the duct. The idea was to prevent lint from building up in the vent pipe, which was a fire hazard, and to capture the warm exhaust air so it heated the laundry room instead of escaping outside. In winter, the trap turned the basement into a warm, humid space that smelled like fabric softener. In summer, it turned it into a steam room. Some versions skipped the metal box entirely and just stretched a nylon stocking over the end of the vent hose, which ballooned with hot air during every dryer cycle and looked like a strange fabric lung breathing on the basement wall. Number 3. The asbestos ironing pad. This was a thick, fireproof pad that sat underneath the iron when you set it down between passes. Before irons had built-in heat-resistant rests and automatic shutoff, you needed somewhere safe to park a hot iron. The asbestos pad could handle the temperature without scorching, burning, or melting, and it sat on the end of the ironing board like a permanent coaster for the most dangerous small appliance in the house. Nobody talked about asbestos back then the way people do today. By the late 1980s, the health concerns had become impossible to ignore, and the pads disappeared from store shelves. Some families kept theirs for years afterward, not realizing that the fireproof surface protecting their ironing board was itself something they should not have been touching. Number 2. The sock sorter clips. These were small plastic or metal clips, usually sold in bags of 20 or 30, that you clamped onto a pair of socks before throwing them into the washing machine. The clips held the pair together through the entire wash and dry cycle so they would come out matched and accounted for. The fear of the missing sock was real. Everybody lost socks in the laundry, and nobody knew where they went. So instead of just sorting socks after they were clean, Somebody invented a product that required you to sort them before they were dirty. Each clip was about the size of a clothespin, made of hard plastic and snapped shut with a spring. Before every load, somebody had to sit down with the pile of dirty laundry, find each matching pair, and clip them together one by one. This took longer than simply matching socks out of the dryer. The clips rattled around in the drum, sometimes popped open from the heat, and occasionally warped if the temperature ran high. By the time you finished clipping, washing, unclipping, and replacing the broken ones, you had spent more time and effort preventing the problem than the problem itself ever actually caused. Number 1. The wringer washer. By the 1980s, fully automatic washing machines were in almost every American home. But in the corner of certain laundry rooms, usually pushed against the back wall or half hidden behind the modern machine, sat the old wringer washer. It was a round tub on legs with a pair of rubber rollers mounted on top, and it had belonged to your grandmother. Nobody used it anymore. Nobody was going to use it again. But nobody could throw it away because it still worked, and throwing away something that worked was not part of that generation's vocabulary. So it sat there, taking up space, collecting dust and laundry baskets stacked on its lid. The rubber rollers had dried out and cracked years ago. The motor had not turned on in a decade. And yet, there it was, in the corner, waiting for a wash day that would never come. If your family had even half of these, the laundry room was not just a room, it was a workshop. If any of these brought something back, drop a comment and tell us which one your family had. Share this with someone who grew up folding clothes in the basement, and please subscribe to keep these stories alive.